Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Living with FASD, an educational and human interest show for those affected by prenatal fetal alcohol exposure and their family and loved ones, as well as anyone in the community interested in learning more about an FASD. Brought to you by someone with both professional and living experience with an FASD. And today, I am so excited to welcome to the mic the infamous Dr. Ken Jones, who's been in the field of FASD longer than anybody. So, as the person that discovered FASD as a thing, or FAS is a thing, Dr. Jones, can you say hello to the audience, give people a little bit about your background, and then let's just have some fun.
I'd be happy to. So I was lucky enough in 1970 to meet a person by the name of David Smith. And Dave Smith was a professor of pediatrics at the University of Washington. And I became a resident there in 1971, I guess. And I'll never forget it because I met him at a party, a welcoming party to the residency at the University of Washington. I'm from Philadelphia. And
I'm a Pennsylvanian too.
You are.
Opposite corner. I'm a Pittsburgher.
Right. So, I got to know Dave Smith. I met him that night, but I got to know him quite well over the next 6 months. And I decided that I wanted to end up as a pediatrician just like him. He was just this phenomenal guy who I really thought was fantastic. And Dave Smith was what he called a dysmorphologist, DYS meaning abnormality and morphology meaning structure. So he took care of kids with birth defects. And so 2 or 3 years later, from that point, I started my fellowship with Dave Smith, and it was a 2-year fellowship. And midway through the first year of the fellowship, he was called down to the King County Hospital in Seattle. He was at the University Hospital, but worked a lot at the King County Hospital. And he was called down to the King County Hospital to see 8 children, all of whom were born to alcoholic women. And I was his fellow. So I jumped in the car and went down with him. And it had turned out that about 3 years prior to that, a pediatric resident by the name of Christy Euland had been on call one night at the King County Hospital. And the obstetric resident came up to her and said, "Christy, what do you know about babies born to alcoholic women?" And she said, "Nothing. Why?" And he said, "Well, I'm just about to deliver such a child. Please find out anything you can find out." So she raced across the street to the library. She looked up everything she could find about alcohol and its effect on the fetus. She found in one textbook that it said alcohol was good for the baby. And she raced back and up the steps to the delivery room and told this guy what she found out. And they both rolled their eyes back and they went running in and delivered this baby. So the baby was very small for gestational age and had a small head and was premature. And then Christy got very interested in this, and she was able to identify 11 children over a period, the rest of her residency, all of whom had been born to alcoholic women. These were alcoholic women. Yeah. Obviously, we know that that's not what we see in the majority of kids who are affected by alcohol today. But these were alcoholic women. And then she went into the practice of pediatrics in the Seattle area. And she turned these 11 kids over to the woman that ran the outpatient department at King County Hospital, the pediatric outpatient department. And Christy had identified the fact that these kids were all small, and they all had intellectual disability, but that's what she thought this was. And this woman who was the head of the outpatient department thought that these kids looked a little different. So she called Dave on the phone, and we both went down there. And there were 8 of those 11 children there, and they were all sitting on their their mother or their caretaker's lap around the room. And we went from one to the next to the next to the next. And they were all small and they were all intellectually disabled. But 4 of them had this very specific pattern of defects. And so that was it. That one day we saw those 4 kids. We went back to Dave's office. We looked up the most prominent features that we'd seen on those 4 kids in Dave's unknown file. We found 2 kids out of the thousands of kids that he had seen over the last 15 years. We went back to their charts, and we found that they were both born to women who drank a lot of alcohol as well. So we had 6 kids in a period of about an hour and a half.
Wow.
And then he went off to Ohio to be a visiting professor. He saw the 7th, and when he was away, I was called over to the university to see a child who was also born to an alcoholic woman who was a dead ringer, and we had 8 kids in a period of about 2 weeks. All of them were born to. So that's the way this whole thing got started, and it was a pretty amazing time.
You know, it seems to me that the experience that Christy had and that you had is not too different from mine. And that's as soon as you get exposed to this idea, it grabs hold of your mind and won't let go. And it becomes the direction of your career.
It does. That's for sure. That's for sure.
That was my experience working as a post-adoption support social worker.
Really?
You know, constantly looking for how can I better support my youth and my families? How can I make things more stable? How can I keep kids from falling through the cracks? Keep parents from giving up? And, you know, just I had gone from looking, well, is trauma this is, you know, I became a TBRI practitioner. Well, that's all well and good, and that's certainly better than any other approach I had learned thus far, but it wasn't enough. And then I went to facets and, you know, took a deep dive into FASD, and it's like, holy moly.
Right.
And there's no looking back, right?
No
so
looking back.
Now I'm only doing foster care part-time, and I'm building my business around FASD.
Actually, this woman, Tina Chambers, who I just mentioned to you, asked me about, I don't know, 10 years ago now, Ken, you're getting old.
Really? I hadn't noticed.
Right. So she said, old man, you need to figure out one thing you want to spend the rest of your life doing. And so think about it. And I did. And I decided what I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing was fetal alcohol syndrome. Up until that point, I had seen a lot of kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder by now. But I was seeing kids with all kinds of different birth defects. And so 10 years ago, I decided to focus my entire life on it. And that's what I spend all my time doing now. So
and I imagine and I imagine that staying focused and staying busy working on this is keeping you younger and keeping you in the saddle longer.
Much longer. which makes you be able to live your life much better as time goes on. But no question.
At this point, I'm 60. I don't know when I'm going to say enough is enough, but I hope to make this the bulk of my focus after too much. I don't want to wait too much longer before it's my full focus, but we'll see how things play out. So what all are you involved in? Well, let me back up. 50 years you've been at this, right? It became a thing worth studying and journaling about and researching 50 years ago. What discoveries have you been most proud of being associated with?
Right. Well, that's a question I must admit I've never thought about exactly, but I quite frankly think that I will tell you I've changed my focus even in terms of FASD right now. But and I think that's the best thing that I have done, because I was focused on research as far as this disorder was concerned. And I was part of a large National Institute of Alcohol and Alcohol Abuse study that was a big collaborative study on this disorder. And I was involved with that for about, maybe 20 years. And what we were focused on was the prevalence of this disorder. And we looked in areas throughout the world. I've been to South Korea, South Africa, all over Western Europe, Eastern Europe, working on this to document the prevalence of this disorder. And then
any surprises there?
Actually, no surprises.
Okay.
After the first place that we went, which was South Africa, where we saw prevalence of this disorder as high as 9% in schools. And,
wow.
And these were all kids with the full-blown fetal alcohol syndrome.
Yeah, that's like 1 in 10.
Absolutely. I mean, just incredible. We would walk into a classroom and you could just pick them out in the classroom. It was just an absolutely tragic situation. But then we went, as I say, all over the world, and actually didn't look at the United States as far as this was concerned until 2018, when we
that's so late.
Yeah, absolutely, and found here that it was from 1.1 to 5% throughout 1 in 20 kids in some areas of this country. But it was clear to me about 8 years ago that what I wanted to be doing was providing a service to people with this disorder. That I really, and that's what I'm doing now, or that's what I'm involved in now, purely clinical kinds of work. And I think that the research that's going on about this disorder at this point is fantastic. But I want to focus my attention on trying to provide service and advocating for kids with this disorder. And I can tell you that sort of what you are really focused on, it seems to me, the most, is adults with this disorder. And it's something that I've gotten very, very involved in as well. It's hard not to. Because there's so little known about it. As far as things are concerned, there's a fabulous study being done now. I don't know if you're aware of it. It's an NIAAA study. Of alcohol study. It's being done primarily by Claire Coles, who's a neuropsychologist at Emory University in Atlanta. Who's
good school.
Neuropsychologist. She's spectacular. And she's doing a study right now on adults with this disorder from the standpoint of problems that they develop, which are absolutely critical information to have. So that's really fabulous, and things are coming out about it that I think are really important. They're going to be really helpful to people as time moves on and she learns more and more about this. But that's a critical issue. I've had I've also gotten at this point into the whole issue, and this is it's an issue that I never thought I would get into, but for 50 years I've been trying to make people aware of this disorder. And I've been talking to the wall a lot of the time, and I
know the feeling.
And I talk to people who don't know much about FASD. I talk to them about the incidence of this disorder and all the effects of this disorder and how devastating this disorder is, and on and on. And I recognize that within a couple minutes, people's eyes start rolling back in their head.
Glaze over.
They glaze over. And then when I say to them, 24% of the kids at the San Diego Juvenile Hall have FASD. They suddenly, what?
Yeah.
And so I am at the point now where I really think that the issue of FASD in the criminal justice system is the way we are going to make people aware of this disorder. And that's sort of a difficult thing to say.
It is, and the hard part about that is the more you play that up, the more you heighten some of the myths and misinformation about it. That, you know, the stereotypical belief that affected people are going to be criminals and they're going to be violent.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is this is that we're increasing stigma, right? That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of that fine line that I mentioned earlier, you know, before we started recording, about, you know, this is an invisible disability. Well, the world is geared toward looking at disabilities. And so we have to play that up enough to get the attention and to get services, but not so much that we harm the people living with it. The way they see themselves and value themselves, and take away hope.
Right.
Because we can do the things we set our mind to if we have the right supports.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And you know, people ask me all the time, well, what about stigma? And that's another thing that I'm very involved in as far as this disorder is concerned, because I think unless we do something to deal with the stigma that comes with this disorder, and in particular to the stigma that we as a society impose upon women who drink during their pregnancy. Unless we can deal with this issue and change it, we're not going to prevent this disorder, because that stigma is enough to stop women who do drink during their pregnancy to tell their obstetrician that they have a problem with alcohol, or they are drinking, or one thing or another like that. And by not getting that support and that help, it's just going to create more and more of a problem. So it's
and we have to play up that it's the alcohol, not the moms, that are the problem.
Absolutely.
Because most mothers will quit drinking as soon as they know.
The vast majority.
Unfortunately, that's too late.
You're right. You're right. And in fact, I think one of the big issues right now, from my perspective, is how do we decrease that time between conception and pregnancy awareness? And if we can do that.
I was reading something about that not long ago.
Yeah. Well, there have been some studies on it.
That's going to drive me nuts.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll come back to mind before we end the call.
Right. Right. Well, one of there are now these, do you know what an oral ring is?
That's what it was. I read about that.
Right.
Yes. Tell the audience about that.
Now, the oral ring is like you know, your watch that tells you what your heart rate is and how much energy you've expended and so forth. And the oral ring does the same thing. It's a little bit more expensive, but it also is now being developed so that it can tell you when you are pregnant. A lot earlier. Now, not at the time of conception can it tell you, but it can tell you a lot earlier than you can find out through pregnancy tests or pregnancy awareness, or one thing or another. So
that's huge.
No, it's absolutely huge, because if you can find out by, as opposed to 5.5 weeks, if you can find out by 2 weeks that you're pregnant, you are decreasing the amount of alcohol you're drinking in the early part of your pregnancy. So it's a huge, huge issue.
I think the real challenge with that ability, though, is accessibility.
Yeah. Rings are not cheap. You're absolutely right.
And the only thing I can think of is maybe there would be a way that it would be standard issue by OB/GYN offices.
That would be great.
I'm thinking outside the box.
Yes, you should. You're way outside the box.
Well, maybe that's because I have FASD.
Yes.
I'm an outside the box thinker.
Right.
Yeah, no, this stigma is a real challenge.
Real challenge. There's absolutely no question
Yeah.
about it.
You know,
And
I remember a year ago at the FASD Now conference, um, I was in a breakout room with you and Justin Shepherd.
uh-huh,
And Justin, who also learned as an adult
yes,
that he is on the spectrum, the two of us were just going, you know,
yes.
about, and you look like you're watching a tennis match. But I'll never forget him, you know, because I was like, you know, I haven't known that long and I'm still figuring out, who do I tell? How do I tell? Why do I tell? You know, it feels a bit like coming out.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And he said the only way past the stigma is straight through it. And then look at me, a year later, I was participating in the FASD Now conference instead of just an attendee.
Yes.
And I have the book and the podcast, and I'm going straight through the middle.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And it has the fear of stigma
Mhm.
is a lot stronger than any real stigma that I have come up against.
Is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
The fear of being outed or judged or whatever else
Yes.
has been a lot stronger than the actual horrid, awkward moment,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. No,
isn't that true of so many things that we're afraid of?
I think you're probably right. I'm sure you're right. Absolutely sure. You're right. And we as a society stigmatize so many things and so many people. I mean, there's
Yeah.
rarely a thing that somebody has that isn't stigmatized.
Yeah.
But this is a horrible one.
Hmm.
We've done a study in which we've now published 3 studies on stigma. And fascinating guy I met not that long ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, named Pat Corrigan, who is that's his thing, is stigma. And
Hmm.
he has made his name on stigma as it relates to mental health. But it turns out that they're the sort of the thing that they use in research on stigma to sort of be the worst kind of stigma is stigma against women who are in jail, terribly stigmatized. So
Hmm.
we've done a study, Pat and I and some other people, in which we've looked at how people look at women who drink alcohol during their pregnancy, women who are in jail, women who have mental health disorders, and women who have substance abuse disorders, not
Hmm.
alcohol, substance abuse disorders.
Yeah.
And alcohol, women who drink alcohol during pregnancy is so much more severely stigmatized than
Hmm.
any of those other things, including women in jail, that it's mind-boggling.
Wow.
So this is really a big one.
That's
And
actually pretty surprising.
yeah, it surprised me as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's fair to say that Pat wanted to use the same approaches to dealing with stigma in a woman towards a woman who drank alcohol during her pregnancy, as he had used in stigma against mental health disorders. But it's
Okay.
very, very different when you think about it, because it's two people now
Hmm.
that have the problem. The mom has the
Yeah.
problem, but there's a baby involved there
Yeah.
as well, and that
Yeah.
baby has the problem as well. So
Yeah.
it's a double whammy, really.
It truly is, because, you know, if the baby stays with the child, with the mom, and is raised by the mom,
Yeah,
then for all that child's struggles, she not only witnesses all that child's struggles, but then has to feel guilty about it.
right, right.
And that's awful.
It's awful, but that's what we got to. That's what we got to deal with, because
Hmm.
I really do believe. I know very, very, very well that there's not a woman in the world who wants to harm her baby.
Yeah.
As as
Yeah.
a from an evolutionary standpoint, we would not be here if it was not the case.
Right.
Because,
And, you know, in the book that I wrote, I talked with, you know, and thank you again for reading an early version. But one of the stories, the mom they thought she had, I can't remember what it was. They thought she had a tumor or something, and she
yes,
went to a
yes,
different city to get it removed. And when they opened her up, they discovered the baby,
right.
closed her back up again. And when she went home, she hid the pregnancy and kept drinking.
Wow.
But even in that case, you have to consider there's reasons for that.
Oh, for
You
sure.
know, there's the fact that addictions are very real struggles.
Very.
And you know, there's no telling what pressures the woman is under that she's having trouble coping with, or, you know, that she has no support for, why
Right.
she has a lack of support, why she can't have the resources that so many of us would reach out to.
Yeah.
So there really is no space for judgment and condemnation.
Zero space for it.
Yeah.
And we've got, yeah, and you know, I don't know any figures as far as this is concerned, but there are so many women that drink, not necessarily because they're addicted to alcohol, but they don't know about this disorder, or any one of a
Yeah.
number of other things. And
Or their doctor or midwife said, "Oh yeah, one glass of red
no
wine, you're
problem,
fine."
right? You're fine. There's no
Yeah.
problem. So I think, and you have already said it, but I'll reiterate it. And that is that a pregnant woman does not cause this disorder.
Yeah.
Alcohol causes this disorder.
Yeah.
And obviously, it would be phenomenal if we could go after the alcohol industry as far as this is concerned. And at some
Wouldn't
point,
that be wonderful?
we need to go after the
Yeah.
alcohol industry.
I mean, just the way, and of course, you never know. I mean, taxes are created in order to fund certain things. And like the cigarette taxes
Yeah,
are supposed to fund all the treatment costs from lung cancer and whatnot. Whether they do or whether the funds are diverted, who knows?
right.
But it would be fabulous
Yeah,
to set that up to fund
for alcohol,
services
for
for
alcohol,
those with FASD.
right. Without any question.
That would be justice. But
That would be just
yeah,
so.
we have a real tough fight to make that happen.
We have a real tough
You can't watch half an hour of TV without seeing at least one,
right.
usually more,
Usually,
commercials for alcohol, in
absolutely,
which it's made to look young and hip. There's beautiful women in it.
always. And cool looking men.
In deference to my husband, I wasn't going to say that.
Right. Right.
So
So
yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And you know, but you think back to that advice, right?
yeah.
One drink, you know, especially the red wine bit, right? It's good for the baby. You know, or it used to be used to you know, address the morning sickness.
Yes. Well, it also used to be used as a way to stop early pregnancy. You aware of that?
I was not.
Yes. IV alcohol.
Wow.
IV alcohol was
Wow.
used in obstetric practices years ago. We're talking now probably 40 years ago.
Wow.
Came
So
in
that was a form of abortion.
well,
Sort of, kind of.
it did not stop labor. I don't know where the idea that it did came from, but it did not stop labor.
Oh, that's what you
Yeah,
meant. Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah.
I'm on
Just
board with you now.
yeah. So it was pretty crazy. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that stopped.
Yeah.
But they actually also proved that it didn't stop labor. So it was a
It took
problem.
away the labor pains, though.
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. So
That's a plus and a minus.
yeah, for sure. For sure. So you know, what we've sort of
We
jumped
got off topic.
jumped
We got way
we
off
jumped
topic.
ahead.
But I can't help but think of something in my conversation that was on this week's episode that just aired this week with Dr. Susan Rich, where
Yes.
she pointed out that alcohol was used in the 20s and 30s by eugenicists
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
as a way of, that's why they put bars
Uh-huh.
and alcohol stores
Uh-huh.
in all the
Huh. Huh.
black and brown neighborhoods.
Really?
And that just got my little social justice bit revved up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's such a mess.
Yeah.
So we have a long way to go,
Yeah,
but
we've
we've
got a
come
long
a
way to
long
go.
way.
But we've come a long way. And
Yeah.
I will tell you the first time I talked about this was at the Society for Pediatric Research meetings in 1973.
Mhm.
And the minute I stopped talking, hands flew up all over the audience and said, "You're crazy. This is the result of some virus that has led to this problem. It's definitely
Yeah.
not anything to do with alcohol." And I'll tell you, it really hit me. But within a couple of years, the medical profession at least started to think about this and look at it seriously.
Yeah.
You're right. There's
Dispassionately, with the values removed.
Yeah.
Look at the facts.
Look at the facts.
Yeah.
And so there still were a number of physicians, unfortunately, that didn't believe it. And as you pointed out, there still, unfortunately, are a number of obstetricians and people that are taking care of pregnant women that think that you can drink a little bit during the pregnancy and it's not going to have an effect on you. So that still exists, and it's still something we have to fight. But we, for the most part, most of us as physicians think that this is not something to take lightly. So that's a positive thing.
Well, and I think too, part of the problem is there's just so much that you have to learn.
Yeah.
And even though between pre-med and med school and residency and fellowship and residency, I mean, that's a longer stretch of learning than any profession, but it's still a relatively short amount of time for everything that you guys have to learn.
Yeah, you're right.
Right?
And there's getting to be more all the time.
Right? So, I often, here I am going back to type 1 diabetes again. I can't help it.
I don't blame you.
I was born in 63, diagnosed in 65 on my second birthday.
Really? Wow.
And happy birthday to me.
Right. Right.
And back then, they knew so little.
Yeah.
My parents were told I wouldn't even make it to 8 years old.
Yeah.
And so I'm very pleased that I have outlived my expiration date all these decades.
You don't look like you have diabetes.
We have a look. Does that mean I'm overweight, or does it mean I'm blind with a wheelchair? I don't know.
Right. Exactly.
I do have a service dog, but she's not a guide dog.
Yeah. Right.
But I tell people that back in the 60s, it was the medical dark ages.
Yeah.
Because they knew so little.
Yeah.
And you look at, now the technology that helps us is so advanced that I was able to retire my service dog.
Yeah.
And let her be just a family pet. But the same thing with, I'm always shocked at how little people know. 6 years ago, I was at Cedars-Sinai with what turned out to be cancer, but I was in for 10 days because it was, they cut me open like they were gutting a fish.
Well.
So recovery was a little slow, but I overrode every decision that they made about how to dose insulin because they kept trying to treat me as though I had type 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Using a sliding scale. Well, those of us in the type 1 world haven't used a sliding scale since the early 80s.
Gotcha.
And a different nurse would take me on that obligatory walk around the hallway to get my strength back,
Right.
and so that they could learn,
Yeah.
right? You'd think I would have gotten a discount for all the CEUs I was handing out.
Right. You think they were getting CEUs, huh?
But
You're wrong.
it floors me how
Yeah.
little the medical professions, whether it's medical school or nursing school, how
Hmm.
little they know about type 1.
Hmm.
They get a 10 to 30-minute lecture on it.
Hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
But we're like 5% of all diabetics.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a completely different disease. It has a lot of the same after effects from chronic high sugar,
Right.
but it's an entirely different cause and
Uh-huh.
process.
Uh-huh.
So you treat it very differently. And I see that same, I'm aghast at
Uh-huh.
the lack of knowledge with
Uh-huh.
FASD,
I am too.
equally as I am with
Uh,
T1D.
One day. Right.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just, it amazes me.
Yeah.
But in fairness, I mean, how much do you guys as physicians have to learn?
Yeah. Well, you don't have
Yeah.
to be fair about this. You
Let me
really don't.
hammer them then.
This disorder is very, very common, as
Yeah,
we've talked, and this should be something that's taught in school, in
yeah.
medical school, and
For
people
more than a half-hour lecture.
exactly, and
Yeah,
frequently not that.
yeah,
So I think that's obviously something that desperately needs to be changed. But
yeah,
I really have this very strong feeling, and at one point we said that we were going to talk about what I sort of have as a dream as
yes.
far as this disorder is concerned, and
Was that your Martin Luther King imitation?
that's
I have
it.
a dream.
I have a dream. It definitely is. And that dream is that we could change the entire culture as far as this disorder is concerned.
I
And
love
that we
that
could
dream.
start talking about this disorder,
Yeah,
because this is a disorder that people do not talk about.
yeah,
They're afraid to talk about it.
yeah,
It's something that's a hush, a hush. You
yeah,
just don't talk about drinking
yeah,
alcohol during pregnancy.
yeah,
And it's such an important part of our society to drink alcohol during pregnancy. And I think
yeah,
it starts when you're about 13 or 14 years of age, because
yeah,
the thing you want to be able to do better than anything else at 13 or 14 is be comfortable talking to somebody of the opposite sex, so that you can. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to have
a social lubricant.
exactly.
Yeah,
And so it's such a positive thing in
yeah,
our society,
yeah,
and it can't be something that causes the problem that you're telling me that it causes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and it,
Because the response is, oh, but it helps.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
does. It's helped me for the last 20 years, and I'm certainly not going to stop now.
yeah,
So we need to change the culture as far
yeah,
as this disorder is
yeah.
concerned.
And
And
I think too, if you don't mind the interruption, we need to play up the fact that the men's drinking matters too,
oh, absolutely.
because it changes the sperm. That was another thing that I learned from Dr. Rich the other week when we sat down at the mic, was that if the sperm has been changed by alcohol, which happens because alcohol changes whatever it touches,
Yeah.
then the baby is that much more susceptible to anything that mom ingests.
Yeah. I think we're a little early as far as that's concerned about paternal drinking. I think that there's no question that drinking alcohol, particularly if it's a man that is a problem drinker, it affects sperm motility and mobility and so forth, which returns after or if he stops drinking. And that's of no question about that.
Okay.
But
So they're poor swimmers.
they're poor swimmers. And
well, I guess you would be a poor swimmer if you're drunk.
if you're drunk.
That's why they say don't drink at the pool.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And it also is a theoretical issue, and the theoretical problem that it can cause what's called epigenetic abnormalities, in which the genes are up and down regulated. Not mutated, not changed, but up regulated and down regulated. And so potentially that can happen to a man just as much as it happens to a woman. And so theoretically, that can occur, and it can affect the male in a way that could potentially affect the fetus. But that's pretty theoretical at this point. It really has not been nailed down in a way that we can hang a hat on it. So I think that I think that men need to stop drinking without any question during their pregnancy, because I think that if you got your husband who's drinking wine at dinner every night, that's not fair. And I think that's part of the support issue that the male has to take on when
and stop with the woman.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question. So I feel strongly about that. But
and I think too, something else that would help people wake up to the seriousness is that if the baby who's developing is female, then the alcohol is also changing the eggs of the next generation.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, for sure.
So a woman's alcohol during a pregnancy with a female baby is not only affecting the child, but also the grandchildren.
Yeah, you're right. It's pretty amazing, huh?
I think would have a lot of people's chins on the floor if they knew that or really thought about that. So
if they thought about it. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think it's an important thing to emphasize, and it doesn't get emphasized.
Yeah, I mean, and in fairness, it's not realistic to say don't drink, right? Let's return to prohibition.
No,
but we can stress, be very intentional about family planning.
Yeah, we can, and it doesn't work. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, and that's why I think so strongly that this issue of decreasing the time between pregnancy, between conception and pregnancy awareness and recognition, and if we can do that, it's a lot easier to do that than it is to tell people don't drink or stop drinking 6 months before you are lucky enough to get pregnant, as maybe it's going to be 1 month, but more likely it's going to be 6 months. So I think that I unfortunately think that we are never going to win the battle.
FASD has been around as long as alcohol has.
You're absolutely right.
And that will continue. But we can try. But here's the flip side of that. I think for all those of us who do have it.
Yes.
We don't for a minute want to say, gee, it's a shame you were born.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
No, we definitely do not want that. But I think it's phenomenal that women do stop drinking when they find out they're pregnant. I think it's absolutely spectacular. Unfortunately, there is a bump in the amount of alcohol that is consumed in the third trimester of pregnancy. And it occurs in people of higher socioeconomic group, and it occurs in individuals with better education and from families in which there's more money.
So do you think that's just about it can't happen to me? FASD affects those parents on the other side of the tracks?
I don't know the answer to this, but I think the reason is because they have read and they know that a drug or a chemical or environmental agent, a so-called teratogen, has its effect in the first trimester of pregnancy, when the heart is forming and the kidneys are forming and the lip is forming and all those things. And after you get past the first trimester of pregnancy,
then
you don't worry anymore. You're safe. That's true with pretty much every medication or drug that a woman takes, except for alcohol. And the reason is that alcohol, the brain is developing throughout all 3 trimesters of pregnancy.
And beyond.
And beyond, exactly.
And beyond, because I mean, the alcohol goes through breast milk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
and of course, you know, reality is the brain's still developing up until 25.
Yeah. Oh, oftentimes maturing until later than
when
that.
Kids realize their parents aren't stupid.
Exactly.
That's when they're done.
Yes. So I think that I think you if maybe you're smarter, or maybe you have more information, and so you know that the pregnancy, that your development is no longer occurring. Well, they're wrong. It is occurring in the brain, but people don't realize that.
But and there's then on the flip side, there are those that are told it's okay to drink until it's pink.
Yes, absolutely.
So you can drink during those first, 1, 2, 3 months.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So either way you put it, you're wrong.
Any way you turn it, wrong.
Right? There's no safe time.
There's no safe time.
And no safe amount. You know,
safe amount.
when I asked my mom, you know, after recognizing so many of the executive function quirks that I have, I asked my mom, I said, did you drink while you carried me? And she's like, oh yeah, every day.
Yeah.
With the tone of surprise in her voice, to say, as if to say, doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
You know, it was the 60s. It was, 11 years before you made your discovery. You were you were still happily being a fellow.
Absolutely.
So she had no clue. So, so I don't blame her at all. But oh my goodness.
You know, one of the things in your book that I was so pleased to hear about is that how and correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the feeling that so many of the women that you talked to in that book developed a relationship with their mother that they never had before, that was a more positive relationship, which I think is really neat.
Yeah, several had been adopted. Several did do searches. One of the women searched too late. Her mom had already passed on from alcoholism. But she was able to connect with other birth family members. Or as she calls them, first family members, right? And another woman refers to them as life-giving mothers, which is a wonderful way to honor them. And for their very selfless decision to place the baby for adoption. But I mean, I don't know, it's hard to imagine my relationship with my mother getting any closer since I'm her sole caretaker. She has dementia. And I did show her my book because just like any daughter, I want her to be proud of me.
Absolutely.
My husband's like, are you crazy? You want her last months or however long it is to be filled with guilt? But she won't. She very quickly put it down, and I think she just wasn't ready for it, and that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
That's okay. But I know of other people who's I'm trying to think of the name of the one person I'm thinking of. He's got a couple videos up on YouTube where talking to his mom about having FASD and his discovery. He found out the same age I did at 56.
Really?
That ended up being so helpful and a healing balm for his mom.
Mhm.
because she had never understood
Mm.
why his behavior was so challenging, why it was so difficult. And so she was able to say it was the alcohol,
Right.
and that brings us, full center back to it's the alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
It's not women
Yeah.
drinking when they don't know they're pregnant.
Right. It's
You
the alcohol.
know, it's
Yeah.
the alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. No question.
So your dream is that we change our society in the way we view
Yeah, we view this
alcohol
issue.
and,
Yeah.
and getting rid of the stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the stigma is critical. Uh,
Yeah.
the amazing thing that I realize is how people don't talk about this disorder, and
Mhm.
it's part of our life,
Yeah.
and we need to be talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the only way we're going to ever be
Yeah.
able to deal with
Well,
this.
when it hits 1 in 20 of us, guaranteed every person knows multiple people who are on the spectrum,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and and you're right. My focus is the adults
Uh-huh.
who have been walking around without understanding why they've been struggling in life.
Right.
Why some things are so hard for them that are easy for other people.
Right.
Why they have always felt like they're different
Yeah.
without being able to pinpoint anything.
Right.
Because we end up owning the shame that gets put on us
Yeah.
for our inabilities to
Yeah.
meet other people's expectations,
Right.
and that's very challenging. So
Right.
and
And
that's why I wrote the book, so
I,
people could recognize themselves and think, aha, this is part of my journey, and then they can go off and explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that a similar awareness occurs with a father and mother that bring their child into the clinic to see me, for example, and people who many people say, well, isn't a horrible shock to parents to tell them that their child's problem relates to alcohol. And the fact of the matter is that 9 times out of 10, it's quite the opposite, because they have felt horrible guilt that and I'm speaking now about adoptive parents, opposed to biologic parents. And it's tragic. And again, it's the stigma, but
Yeah.
I get very few biologic parents that come into my clinic, and they're the group that I just wish so much that would be the major group that I was seeing, but I see very few biologic parents. But for adoptive parents, when I tell them that their child's problem, all this behavior is not due to something that they are doing as bad parents, which they hear all the time from everybody,
They
teachers.
do. I have good friends who adopted kids on the spectrum, and a very well regarded child psychologist as a psychiatrist in our town
Mhm.
said to one of them, well, they've been in your home for how long now? It's your problem. What are you doing?
Right.
And another was diagnosed, well, so-called diagnosed. They actually weren't, because they were never the patient,
Yeah.
but another was labeled as having factitious disorder. They're making it all up,
Uh,
which is tragic. You
Tragic,
know,
terrible, just terrible.
parents need all the support they can get,
Yes. Yeah.
because it's so isolating
Yep. It is.
to raise a child who cannot meet the world's expectations for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a great relief in many
Hmm.
cases to hear that
Yeah.
your child has FAS.
Yeah. Bad news is better than no news,
No,
and it's kind of the same in the adoption world. If you don't share all the details, no matter how ugly, with the child you've adopted, about their birth family,
mhm.
parents keep secrets in order to protect their feelings. But a kid's going to make up anything a child explains that void. Anything they make up is going to be worse than the truth.
Mhm.
We can wrap our heads around bad news a
Yeah.
lot easier than we can go on with that unexplained void.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You are right.
12 years of college will get me something.
All right.
I one of the things that that alcohol did for me was make it, along with countless others, make it difficult to finish things I've started. And I am very blessed that intellectually I'm gifted. So when I was 16, I ran away to college. It was the yuppie version of running away from home.
Yes.
But because I was so young and developmentally, not on board with my academic development, I kept changing my major, and with that changing my school. And by the time I started my junior year, I had 120 credits in college.
Absolutely amazing.
So it's very well rounded, which is why I can have the kinds of conversations that I do, but that doesn't at all take away from the struggles that I've had.
Right.
The lack of judgment that I've had at various points in life, especially those transitional years between living at home and being out on my own, because I hit college dorms at 16.
That's too early.
That's foolish, even for someone who's neurotypical.
Right. Right.
I think if that had happened back in the day when there were cell phones and my mom could have known how vulnerable I was making myself,
right,
she probably would have had a heart attack.
Yeah.
But it just gives you wisdom highlights.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
No experience is wasted.
No.
We can learn
right.
from all of it,
Everything.
even if some of us have a harder time learning than others.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
So I am so delighted for you to have joined me today.
Thank you very much.
I'm living with
to have had the opportunity.
I hope we can do this again sometime.
It would be fun.
Yeah. We've had a lot of information for our audience, but we've also had a lot of laughter.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for this time. Everybody, I can't believe we're at the end of another episode.
It did go awfully quickly.
I know, they disappear like that.
Right.
The one thought that has come up and up and up in my mind that people need to really pay attention to, and might make the seriousness of this, to bring it home a little more, is the realization that this is a whole body diagnosis.
Yep. No
right?
question.
That it's not just developmental, it's not just behavioral, it's not just about the face.
Rarely about the face.
Right?
Yes.
But it's the heart, it's the liver, it's the teeth, it's whatever happens to be under construction when the alcohol hits that part of the system that's growing.
Right. Right. And even I'm not exactly sure how to explain this, but I think there's absolutely no question that there is, based on some of the work that Claire Coles is doing at Emory on people as they get older, that a lot of what is happening to people as they get older is that they have premature effect on different organ systems. And a lot of things like arthritis and bone pain that occur in the 30s as opposed to the 50s.
I was I think 30 when I started taking medication for arthritis.
Right. And I think that your experience is one that obviously it is something that had an effect on you at a very early stage in development before you were born. But it still is having its effect now.
And I needed orthodontia. I was missing teeth. Right. I'm minus 4 molars compared to most people.
Are you? That's very interesting.
My uncle happened to have 4 extra, which really makes me wonder about my mom's generation and what were my grandparents doing.
Exactly.
I don't know. She has dementia. I can't ask.
Yeah. Right, right, right. So
No,
I think that that's a very critical point.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
critical point.
That study that the ALC Changemakers did, or the survey that they did, and the information that came out of that is just
Oh yes, absolutely.
phenomenal,
It's
phenomenal.
phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
I read that, or actually my introduction to that was from Robbie Seal's podcast, FASD Family Life. I must have listened like 5 times or more because
Yes,
there was so much there.
yeah,
And it was about the time that my mom was getting kicked off hospice because she wasn't declining fast enough.
really. Okay.
So I had to find a new neurologist for her. And I made myself an appointment
Yes.
because I wanted a benchmark.
Uh-huh.
I wanted a mark in the sand. This is where I'm functioning cognitively, against which I can get measured down the road if I'm really struggling.
Uh-huh.
And the neurologist was like, well, we looked at the scans, and let's just say if I were to give you a grade, you'd be getting an 88%. That's a B+ in life.
Yes.
Thinking I'd be pleased. And of course, the perfect answer came to me in the parking lot. I don't know if you're like that, but those perfect quips are late in coming with me. I'm
Me
like,
too.
a B+, does he not realize how far of a fall that is for me?
Right.
In 12 years of college, I think I only got 2 Bs.
Right. Right.
What's up with that?
Right.
So, but it was comforting to know that I do have quite a ways to fall before I'm going to actively need help.
Yeah. No, that is.
So,
That's good.
but yeah, I've noticed changes as I have moved through my 50s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that, that early diagnosis of dementia,
Mm-hmm.
that's a real concern.
Yeah.
206 times greater risk compared to the general population. That's huge.
It's huge.
That's
Huge, huge.
huge.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's because so many of us struggle with the passage of time and being able to track that. And if you can't date stamp or time stamp information, it doesn't get filed appropriately
Yeah. Yeah.
in your memory banks. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if those pieces are connected.
Yeah. I think they probably are.
Yeah. But I don't know anyone who would want to take that on as a research project. If you do, please mention it. Or do you plan to still be working that long to take on a new problem?
Sure.
Go for it.
I'll go for it.
Because I know, there are millions of people who, like me, would want that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's for the, over 15 million people in this country who don't know they're on the spectrum.
Yeah.
That I'm doing what I can to raise awareness. So
that's great.
yeah. There the one thing in my book that I did not notice in time, the editor stopped replying to my emails. So evidently I've had all the free fixes I'm going to. When I when I calculated the numbers,
yes,
I twisted, and I based the number of adults off of the number of the total population. So instead of 16.6 plus million American adults, it's actually 15 point, over 15 million. That's still a staggering number.
Oh, it's a staggering number.
People
Absolutely
walking
staggering.
around in a lot of pain, confused about it.
Very confused. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
And we definitely have to schedule another time because I could keep talking.
Yeah, I could too. It's great.
Oh, all right. So, but it's been over an hour. So I'm going to let you go in appreciation for your time. And to all my listeners, thank you for hanging in on this extra free little bit of podcast. Don't forget to come back on Friday on my YouTube channel for my free Friday tidbit of the neurobehavioral model, a little 5 or 10 minute teaching that will help explain some of the quirks that we have with FASD. And come back again next Monday for another episode of Living with FASD. Have a wonderful weekend. And, the holidays I'm not sure when this is going to get aired, if it's going to be before or after the holidays, but I'll certainly be thinking of everyone and hoping that everyone has a blessed time. So thank you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.